Hi, I'm Marissa D'Andrade for Measuring Humanity, and today we have had one of the most, in my opinion, inspiring, but also one of the most challenging applications of the asset-based indicator framework, and that is applying Measuring Humanity with the deaf community. So many things that I took for granted as a researcher, as a human being, entering into the field, were just completely blown out of the water within the first few minutes of arriving. We decided to hire and work with one of the deaf comedians, or in fact, I would say the deaf community's most famous comedian, John Smith. So he came to join us at a comedy venue here in Glasgow. And we decided, or this was very much from the community themselves, they wanted to use comedy as a way on engaging on important mental health issues.
So the deaf person gets really frustrated, just can't get in touch with the doctor, so it's really frustrating. So for the doctor, I'd say, there's no interpreters, can't get through the doctor, it's really difficult, and I know what you're like, because that's how you are. So you make her wheel, into reception, James got phoned and said, I've got a sore stomach. And the receptionist like, what? And you go, no, I'm deaf. And the shutters go down.
So the idea of using comedy and the best known comedian from this particular community to talk about issues that are important to the deaf community was profound, we thought, and would be just like all of the other applications for Measuring Humanity. So we got a venue, a comedy venue, because that would be right, and we thought, well, this is going to be great. We invited people from the mental health service, so again, we've got different practitioners involved in the process. We have people from the deaf community coming. Plus, we had 4 interpreters, because all in all, we were about 20 people, and we thought that this would work out. And then we realized that applying it with this particular marginalised community was even harder than any of the applications of Measuring Humanity than we'd ever done before. So before I even got here, it was incredibly hard to even communicate with John. He assumed I could sign. I assumed when he said he wanted to FaceTime me that he could lip read. Both of us were completely wrong about our assumptions. In the last week, 2 weeks, I've been trying to get an interpreter, and I couldn't get an interpreter in the last 2 weeks. It was very difficult to get one. John and I couldn't speak. We couldn't communicate until today. So we had to communicate. Yeah. So we could only do it by email because every organization that I tried to reach was full and I couldn't get anybody.
I feel it's really stressful for us.
Really.
You've got something you want to get it out and you can't get it out, there's no interpreter there.
So what happens if there's an emergency? So the whole idea of crisis and urgently needing to communicate about an issue was flagged up instantly as a barrier. And we had some really powerful stories today from people in the deaf community who were sharing about how this came to life when they experienced mental health difficulties and they just could not communicate.
Let's say it was about 10 years ago, I've lost count now. I went to a psychologist and they said to me, okay, the interpreter's on their way, and I was waiting at the reception area, and then I get notified by the receptionist that the interpreter would be coming, and I had something that I needed to talk to the psychologist about their name. So I get in the car, jumped in the car, so angry, and I actually felt like I just want to crash into a brick wall. I got home and picked up a pair of scissors, I started harming myself, and I was on my own, at home. I texted my father, and I said to my father, I hurt myself, Dad. And my dad, he was stuck because he wasn't near where I stayed. He was in Prestwick at that time. My dad then had to phone the psychologist, and explain the situation, what was happening to me at that moment in time. And then the woman on the phone said, well, we can't discuss Frances because of that protection. And my dad said, but she's up home harming herself right now. And then there was a phone call made to the police, and then the police came to the house. And because I've got a dog, the dog was barking because there was somebody at the door. The next thing I knew, 2 policemen were at the door, and I didn't know what was going on. And the policeman said to me, he starts talking away to me. I said to him, I'm deaf. And then he said to me, have you hurt yourself? And I showed him my arm, and the police officer looked at me, and then the 2 police officers come into the house, come into the hall. I was standing in a scenario where all this had just taken place. I was highly distressed that my brother here arrived, and you know, it was just impossible to have effective communication with 3 hearing individuals, myself. There was an ambulance then. I didn't know an ambulance was on its way. I felt lost. I was emotionally distressed. My daughter at that time, she was 10 years of age, and her gran had dropped her off and ran up the stairs and was like, "What's going on?" And then the police said to my daughter, "Okay, right, now bear in mind, my daughter's 10 years old." They then used my daughter as an interpreter for this scenario and said,
Oh.
"Okay, tell your mum what we need to do is you need to take your mum to the hospital." And I'm telling my daughter, "I don't want to go to the hospital." And then my daughter saying, "My mum says she doesn't want to go to the hospital." And then the police officer said, "If your mum refuses, then we will have to detain her." So this is going through my third party, who is my daughter. This is getting interpreted by my daughter. I get taken away. Daughter stayed at her gran's, and I was with my brother. I mean, it just centres around communication. And later on that evening, CPN, psychiatric nurse, yeah. The CPN came along and wanted to ask me a series of questions, and by that point I was like, I just want to go home, because he come up to me and they were just talking away to me. There was no sign language there, and that, I mean, that's just one of my experiences. You know, I never went back to the psychologist centre ever again.
So, much like the other applications of the acid-based indicator framework, today started off with the very first part of the process, which is trying to understand who the deaf community is. So, who is the deaf community? And interestingly enough, unlike some of the other applications, there was some really instant, almost what they described as a brotherhood, a family, an instant coming together and describing the deaf community as a very coherent whole.
Yes, a brotherhood, isn't it? You know, we feel like brothers, we feel like sisters, and we use sign language to communicate every day. We share our experiences through sign language, so language is very important.
When you're with a deaf person, you can easily just connect, and it's just, you don't have to worry or stress about having to try and figure a way of communicating.
What we might call a linguistic minority, yeah. And my involvement and my membership of the deaf community means very much to me. So anybody who uses sign language, then that's somebody I feel I have a real affinity towards. And I don't necessarily have that same affinity towards other people who don't share sign language or use sign language, but it's not necessarily to say anything bad about them. It's just that I have more of affinity towards those who do use sign language.
And then moving on to the next onion layer of the ABIF, if you like, we were really interested in understanding a bit more about some of the indicators, such as happiness. You know, what does it mean for this particular community to be happy? And interestingly enough, what emerged was a bit of a wish list about how they would want things to be.
Little things, you know, you see, for instance, so you might see a mime artist in Circuit Hall Street, and see, because that's a very visual performance, that's something that finds as a deaf person really, really appealing, gets your interest. I think if you see, you know, maybe people just use a wee bit more mime, more gesture in terms of communication. So I go across the Edinburgh Festival and you see all these performers, and it is very visual. And I think, you know, hearing people learn a lot from how others use their body to communicate, and I think that would make a big difference for members of the deaf community. I mean, I think at the moment, my status is I try to avoid mixing with hearing people, you know. And so what I do at home is I spend time, you know, taking the dog out for a walk. I do crafts at home, craft activities. So spend time just admiring and enjoying nature, you know, and just trying to relax.
So then, thinking about evaluation and outcomes, we were also really interested in understanding a bit more about how the kind of data that we were collecting could be used to feed into evaluating the services, and also figuring out whether or not they were appropriate. And much like every other Measuring Humanity project, what we found is that the nature of evidence and what we traditionally use as evidence in public health just was not working and does not work at all for the deaf community. Ethics, the way in which we take consent, the way in which we share information about projects, all of it in the written word, very heavily worded, lots of information. All of that didn't work, right? Is that right? Am I right in saying that?
It needs to be translated.
Into
Like, so the form, the interpreter would actually translate the form.
English and the written word not being the first language, British Sign Language being their first language. So these forms that need to be filled out, questionnaires, none of this works. On a scale of 1 to 10, I mean, that is pretty meaningless in this particular situation. So what we found is, once again, that the nature of evidence really needed to be challenged because it was failing this particularly marginalised community. Once again, creativity and connectivity came up. This time we used comedy, and the people who were involved, both from the mental health side and also from the deaf community, were already clear that creativity was already part of the process of sharing and engaging, and actually was an important and crucial form of data.
Everybody says laughter is the best medicine because it allows people to express themselves physically and emotionally.
What you to have a little chat in your groups. Doesn't matter deaf and hearing, doesn't matter.
Use the material that we've just been sharing, yeah? So don't make up new experiences. Stick to the stuff that we've spoken about.
I think really deaf people are very sensitive, and maybe that magnifying glass will give them extra information, means that they can find out extra things. Who wants to go first? Who wants to go first? Come on. Yeah, somebody say that. Okay, you're hearing and you can't sign, and you're going to. I've got a problem with my eyes. We're going to check them. I can't see for reading, and I can't understand all the letters in English. I don't know what it means. What does it say? What does it say? I don't know what you're saying. I can't communicate. I can't understand you. I don't know. Can you see me now? I don't know. Can you read me now? You know, you're not allowed to touch people now. You know, that's kind of frowned upon, isn't it? But deaf people, you can't hear them. What happens there if you try to shout at a deaf person? You need to be able to maybe alert them that you're there.
Trains hammering down towards London. And you're feeling sleepy. Trying to stay awake for the conductor. Where is he? I sneak get asleep as soon as he's got the ticket. You start to drop off. And you're away. So Inspector comes up the aisle. I know, it's warm, I know. Oh, look at this lassie, fast asleep there. It always happens, it's fine. So the train comes to a massive stop, emergency stop. I think we've got a dead person on the train. They're not responding. So emergency services are going, yeah, no problem, we'll get somebody set up right away. So ambulances are on the way. So the flashing lights, screeching into position. Come up with their stretchers, up the side of the track, into the train. What's wrong? She's dead. What's wrong with her? I think that she's dead, look. Which is? We'll feel her pulse. Here we go.
The Act, really, for me, education is the number one priority. So it's a slow process at the moment. Things seem to be taking a long time. They say maybe 5 or 6 years. At the moment, whether it will be successful or not, we don't know. We'll just have to wait and see what will happen. But hopefully things will be improved. The access to education is a number one. There's a whole range of other things, obviously. Transport, schools, doctors, you know, there's a whole range of things where access needs to be improved for deaf people across the whole of Scotland. I really do hope, my dream for the future is that education, BSL will be in schools. across the whole of Scotland, so that children maybe just learn for an hour a week, learn some BSL, learn the vocabulary, improve their skills, means that when they grow up, they'd be able to communicate with deaf people. So whatever their job is, whatever they end up doing in their life, if they're a doctor, a dentist, a nurse, whatever profession they end up in, they, just in general, people would be able to communicate with deaf community. So that would be my dream.
Having dealt with some deaf people in our ward, it's very difficult to get interpreters. You know, quite a few times we book interpreters that they don't turn up or they have to cancel. And it's very, we try and improvise as best we can, we write things down. We don't know what else to do, we don't sign, we don't have anybody that signs, so it's difficult.
I think the barriers to mental health services are probably there for most people, and this is just an additional one at a time that you don't need another barrier.
I think when we coming to this, we're looking to try and access learning to sign. We want to know more about BSL. We were really fortunate to go to an event a few weeks ago, and it's not a great deal, but sometimes it's all we have. We've got a book with some signs, so we can communicate more than we could 3 weeks ago, which is a step in the right direction. Doesn't anywhere adequately deal with your frustration at all, but kind of on the floor we're trying, and we'll kind of grasp at anything we can at the salient time.
What I know from my friends who are deaf is the isolation results in a lot of the depression, and actually helping people access activities that bring them in, make them more connected with other people hearing and deaf, and getting that information out to people, and acknowledging within the deaf community what can be done to empower people to promote good mental health. As a clinician, we don't have a lot of tools in our toolbox, and it takes me 7 years minimum to qualify. Actually, we could be sharing a lot of those skills with people who sign, so that there could be more mental health first aid, you know, because it's going to take a long time to grow a new generation of signing children who become the signing professionals.
We're working within a system that has just not got it right at all, and that's like come across so strongly. But also, like, as an individual, I feel really challenged to go out and think about how I do things. Like, I'm still training, like I'm just in first year learning to be a psychologist, and it's really made me think about how I do things and thinking about signing, like how do I access that. So yeah, lots of thoughts, and I just want to thank you all for being so honest in what you've shared today.
So that was Measuring Humanity with the deaf community, and a big strong call for action off the back of this. So where are we going to go with this? How is this going to inform legislation, and how is this going to actually make a difference to deaf people? I'm Marissa D'Andrade for Measuring Humanity, and as always, get involved. Check out our website, measuringhumanity.org, or follow us on Twitter @MeasureHumanity.